Presbyterian disaster assistance, because as you know, we are gathering our prayers and our thoughts and our money in support of the Puerto Ricans who are still in dire straits. Just a word so that we all know what we are donating for, and two, a word about the Presbyterian disaster assistance. This assistance program enables congregations and mission partners to witness and in the healing love of Christ through caring for communities adversely affected by catastrophic events. The PDA, as it is called, is the Emergency and Refugee Program of the Presbyterian Church USA. And the core budget, including staff and administrative costs, is funded through the One Great Hour of Sharing, and its program work is additionally funded through designated gifts. Now, there are four foci, or four aspects, that the PDA concentrates on. First of all, the PDA focuses on the long-term recovery of disaster-impacted communities. Second, it provides training and disaster preparedness for presbyteries and synods. And thirdly, it works collaboratively with church partners and members of the ACT Alliance. ACT is the acronym for Action by Churches Together. And this is something that they do internationally and nationally with other faith-based responders. And finally, the PDA connects partners locally and internationally with key organizations active in the response, United Nations, national voluntary agencies active in disaster, World Food Program, Red Cross, FEMA, and others. Now today, the PDA has a specific designation for Hurricane Maria and for Puerto Rico, and that is where our monies will be going to today. The PDA is remaining in constant contact with PCUSA leadership in Puerto Rico. As you know, as of the end of December, at least according to the New York Times, only 50% of the city of the island has restored electricity. And I also read, I think in the New York Times, that suicide rates are high. So let's give, act, and pray for Puerto Rico. There are baskets, as you've seen, on the tables, and I think we've already talked about those of you who are writing checks, that you write make the checks out to the First Presbyterian Church in Bowling Green, and include Puerto Rico on the subject in the subject area on the bottom of your check. Finally, I should also mention that if you don't happen to have your checkbooks with you today, you can always sign up over on that small table. Beatrice has prepared materials about Puerto Rico and has also prepared a little list in which you can include your information and come back or send back your donations at a later date. So once again, thank you all for coming. It is my great pleasure, and please help me welcome Professor Francisco Cabanillas. Professor Cabanillas is a professor of Caribbean and Latin American Studies in the Department of World Languages and Cultures, and is here to tell us about Puerto Rico from a personalized past and present. Puerto Rico from a personal and from a professional point of view. Thank you very much.
Hello everyone. Let me see if I can speak without having to hold the microphone. Can you hear me?
No.
Okay, maybe this way. That.
It should be on.
Hello. Should I use the microphone?
Yes.
Let's see. Okay. It's going to be difficult, but can you hear me now?
Yes.
Okay. It's really my pleasure to be here sharing this information with you, because I know this church quite well through my wife, who works in a Latino organization called La Conexión. So believe me, I'm very familiar with the bathrooms and upstairs. We have many activities over here. And I have also been following some of the stands the church has taken, like not in our town. And I thought that this is a socially progressive church to which I want to contribute with my information. I also want to tell you that I think my mother was the first and only refugee that came from Puerto Rico to Bowling Green, mid-October to early December, when the situation over there was pretty bad. She's 84 years old, she's functional, she lives by herself, and my niece, who is studying up in Michigan State University, and myself decided she does not need to go through this problem of not having electricity, anything. So she came over here and spent some time with us, when in fact our weather over here was quite nice. Over there, she was mistreated, but over here it was not that cold for her. And I'm glad that it was not the first time that she came to BG. She has come many times before, so she already knows the town and was happy to be here. On behalf of the people of Puerto Rico, I want to thank you for your solidarity and generosity. Okay? I have prepared a presentation and I showed it to my wife, and it had a historical synopsis of U.S.-Puerto Rican relations. And she said, that's not what they want to hear. What? No, that's not what they want to hear. They want you to go there to talk about the hurricane. And I said, oh my goodness. Well, I'm going to scratch it. And I prepared a different presentation, leaving that out. Then I came here and I told Christina, and she said, no. We want to know about that historical synopsis. So I wrote down kind of a brief historical panorama. And it all starts in 1898. 1898 is known in English as the Spanish-American War. In Spanish, we say it was the Spanish-Cuban-American War. When you say it in English, Cuba disappears, and it seems that the Spanish-American War was a confrontation between Spain and the United States, which is not the case. The United States joined the war at the very end, after it had been going on for 10 years. And it easily defeated Spain, and then it sat down with Spain in Paris, and they signed a treaty. And because of that treaty, Cuba, Puerto Rico, Guam, and the Philippines became U.S. colonies. They were colonies of Spain before, and they became U.S. colonies. A historical fact that irritated Mark Twain. He became extremely upset with the Spanish-American War, particularly because of what was happening in the Philippines, where 200,000 plus people were killed. Not so much blood was shed in Cuba, much less in Puerto Rico. Twain was really upset, and he became the president of the Anti-Capitalist League in the United States. So 1898 is the important point where the narrative starts, U.S. Puerto Rico. Second date that is important is 1900. during that year, a new category was created in the United States. What does the Republic do with all these territories? You don't want to consider them colonies. So the United States created the concept of non-incorporated territory, which until today, it's the fundamental concept that establishes and maintains the relationship between the US and Puerto Rico. It's going to become more complicated, but a non-incorporated territory, it's a territory in which the US does not have to follow the same rules that it needs to follow with the states, where it is justified to have unequal categories, like for instance, Puerto Rican pay the same amount of Medicare but receive less. And some people get very upset, but under the non-incorporated territory, there's nothing illegal about that, okay? Non-incorporated territory does not have the right to restructure its financial or economic debt. It simply cannot, okay? So the non-incorporated territory, 1900, was an important development in the relationship. Next comes an important date, 1917, 1 year before the end of the First World War. The US Congress unilaterally states all Puerto Rican males are now US citizens. Many people, of course, put the dots together and said, and now they have become soldiers. Hmm? There's new historical research in Puerto Rico and in the US, historians debating that point. I am not familiar with the research, but I know it's there. So far, I take 1917's granting of citizenship to Puerto Rican males as the main narrative, okay? 1940s, the US makes all Puerto Ricans, not only the males, citizens, okay? Also during the 1940s and 50s, something extremely dramatic took place in Puerto Rico because of many reasons that I cannot comment here. What happened was that the island's economy was fundamentally transformed from agriculture to industry, and an industry that ran parallel with the US economy, okay? It was an industry which was meant to be part of the US industry, okay? One of the immediate consequences of that dramatic transformation was that you had, from the 1940s, 1950s, over 1 million peasants displaced from the island because their agriculture was useless. And those people were told to go to New York City, where they were going to achieve the American dream. Even though they had never been outside their small town, they did not speak English, they were not prepared to face the reality. Migration was a direct consequence, and it's still part of the Puerto Rican reality. 1952, from 1898 to 1952, US President appointed governors. Okay? By 1952, there was a lot of political tension with the political reality of the island. internationally, people were saying, you have colonies. When India and other countries were fighting to decolonize themselves, people were pointing at the U.S. in the United Nations and saying, what is that? The Republic has colonies? Can't have that. So in 1952, the U.S. and Puerto Rico created a formula, which in Spanish would be like Estado Libre Asociado, Free Associated State. Kind of paradoxical, if you want. If you like homogeneity, you have three terms that are in constant conflict. And that term was rendered into English into something less problematic, although less authentic. It was called the Commonwealth of Puerto Rico. Okay? And that is the formula that exists until right now. Commonwealth of Puerto Rico, because it's a non-incorporated territory, it's going to be unequal, 2 states. It will have a representative in Congress with voice, but no vote. Okay? And pretty much everything in Puerto Rico, it's ultimately decided by the U.S. Congress. Puerto Rico has no fundamental autonomy to do anything. In a disaster like this one after Hurricane Maria, that reality hits you in the face. Because if you want to do something, you cannot do something. Okay? So Maria has exacerbated the problematic political situation Puerto Rico has had with the U.S. for more than 100 years. I'm going to jump to next date. I'm going to skip from 1952 to 1990s, which was kind of, in a way, similar to the U.S. From 1970s onwards, U.S. economy was fundamentally based on credit. Wages were not going up. Instead, they decided to allow people to use credit, and today the U.S. middle class has a huge debt, just as Puerto Rico also has a huge debt. During the 1990s, in the U.S., we had to face NAFTA, right, which destroyed U.S. manufacture to the advantage of U.S. agriculture. And in Puerto Rico, what we have was the end of a tax policy that gave U.S. corporations tax shelters so that they could go and settle over there. Okay? In a way, before NAFTA, Puerto Rico kind of experimented with the model. 1996, Puerto Rico is going to phase out that law, which was fundamental for the industry. That's the only reason why there was an industry there, and there have been many different industries. The only reason was that 1996 law. It was going to be phased out by the year 2006. No more tax shelter for corporations, and that's why in Puerto Rico, what the U.S. experienced in 2008, it already experienced in 2006. Okay? And that's kind of where I'm going to stop the chronological account. The year 2000 has been difficult. It has also been difficult in the United States. And we always say in something that has become a cliche, but it depicts the reality quite sharply. When the U.S. gets a cold, Puerto Rico gets pneumonia or has to go to the hospital, emergency care, because of the complete dependence, okay? Remember when Maria happened, Puerto Rico, it's in that economic, political situation, and I'm going to tell you more about the situation of Puerto Rico when Hurricane Maria happened. Okay, so I'm going to stop right there with the historical account. Please, at the end, if you have any question, I'll try to answer them regarding this political situation. I call my presentation Maria Before and After. And I decided to start with a quote of something that I wrote back in November. And it says, 2 months after the blow, one who lost his house asked on a radio program sarcastically, when is the picnic going to be over? I want to go back home. The inability to fix reality takes over the political landscape of the U.S. non-incorporated territory of Puerto Rico, a modern colony. So, I'm going to talk a little bit about before Maria and after Maria, okay? And in talking about before Maria, I'm going to take you back, way back. Fasten your seatbelts. We're going to go all the way back before 1493, when Christopher Columbus conquered the island. And the Taíno Indians in Puerto Rico, who were the same people inhabiting the islands of Cuba, Jamaica, Dominican Republic, Haiti, they had a goddess named Huracan. In Spanish, then it becomes Huracan, and in English, hurricane. So Huracan was a goddess that destroyed everything with the wind that she provoked by moving her hands like this. Okay? Interestingly, for the Taíno Indians, hurricanes were dangerous, but not as catastrophic as they became after 1493, for a number of reasons. First, because their architecture was quite simple. They used flora, trees, to build their houses. If the hurricane comes and destroys your house, you rebuild in no time whatsoever. They also took their main staple, which was the yucca root, and they dug deep holes, put their food there, cover it, and they would not starve to death after the hurricane. They also removed themselves from the coastal area, which Maria dramatized. I, over here, early in the morning, was watching YouTube videos, seeing how the water from the sea was getting inside the place that I had been less than a month before, unstoppable. What do you do with that water? So the Taíno Indians, they said, stay away from the coastal areas, and also stay away from those rivers. Rivers have caused a lot of turmoil. Bridges collapsed, they destroyed roads, they killed people, animals. So the Taíno Indians, they removed themselves from those areas, and then they said, you know what, let's go inside a cave. Wait until the hurricane passes, and then we go back and continue our daily life. Let's move forward, okay? What was happening in Puerto Rico before Maria hit the island on a horrible September the 20th? Well, something important and tragic was happening in Puerto Rico. In the year 2015, the government of Puerto Rico had to be honest and say what many people knew 2-3 years before. And it was that Puerto Rico had an unpayable debt. Public corporations like water, electricity, had a $72 billion debt. Impossible to pay. And also the government had a $50 billion commitment with retirement plans that it could not, by any stretch of the imagination, pay. Okay? Puerto Rican debt has been argued in many forums. And I think that some people say that it was a debt that the same system creates. Like, for instance, here we had the 2008 collapse of Wall Street up in Michigan, in Cleveland. They were destroying houses that people could not pay them, so that they do not destroy the property value of the neighbors, okay? So, for many people, Puerto Rican debt is the typical debt that this is kind of technical, neoliberal capitalist system creates. And remember, Puerto Rican government, in order to get a loan, needs federal approval, because it does not have the power to be an independent entity. So, some people argue that's an unconstitutional debt. Some people say, how can Puerto Rico start paying the debt without properly auditing it? That part that it's bad, it's going to be caught, and the part that is legal, it's going to be paid. It has been impossible to move Wall Street interest, sit down on a table and contemplate, okay, let's define which part is illegal of the debt and which part is real debt. And they are pushing so that the island ends up paying what it will never be able to pay, okay? So, 2015, the government of Puerto Rico finally says, you know what? We have a huge debt, okay? And Puerto Rico's debt is also part of something that we have to face in the United States, which is the deindustrialization. The US is deindustrializing. Companies like Walmart, they push their producers to move outside the United States, where they can pay cheaper salaries and they can lower the prices. In the process, I say Walmart is the most expensive store in town, because they destroy the capacity, they destroy the jobs that pay good salaries, and in order to make things cheaper, okay? If the US deindustrializes and US workers suffer and pay a price by lowering their economic position, imagine what happens in Puerto Rico, whose industrialization was completely dependent on the US, okay? So it's even worse over there. From 2006, when the tax laws phased out and companies were no longer getting tax cuts in Puerto Rico, and they began to move away, from that day onward, a dramatic and scary process of depopulation began to happen. I'm going to be brief. When Puerto Rico industrialized, 1940s, 1950s, people celebrated that the peasants left, because otherwise they would not be able to modernize. They became an obstacle. Please go away to New York You'll become rich over there, but get out of Puerto Rico so that we can modernize our economy. In the 1970s, there was another diaspora, and I belong to that diaspora. More middle class, people with education, and the people in the island said, ciao, no problem. Now, after the year 2006, they cry when people leave. First time in my life that I hear on a radio program, read on a newspaper, hear on the street, you guys should not be leaving because we are going to starve to death if more people leave the island. Okay, so that has been a dramatic change, particularly for someone like myself, and I consider myself part of the diaspora, okay? From 2006 to today, it was not the peasants living like the 1940s and 50s. It was not the middle class living. Right now, 2006 onward, primarily the rich people were living. Doctors, there's no money there, I'm out. Engineers, architects, and of course, everyone else. But the mark this time is that the upper classes had to say, I'm leaving. Okay. So, 2015, the governor of Puerto Rico said, guys, we have this problem. Many people said, we knew that 3, 4, 5 years ago. Why did you wait so long? 2016, Obama administration takes care of the situation, and it appoints what is called a board of fiscal control, something like what happened in Detroit. It's a supra-government that it's placed on top of the government, and then it says what you can spend, what you cannot spend, what you can do, what you cannot do, based on the interest of Wall Street. How can we squeeze money of this island, losing its economy? How can we nonetheless squeeze the economy so that we can pay Wall Street its debt? The Board of Fiscal Control was composed of 4 Republicans, 3 Democrats. Some of them were from Puerto Rico, living in the island or the diaspora. Some of them were bankers who helped created all the chaos. Something that also happened here. They asked the guys to create the problem, come and solve it. Are you serious? Yes, we are very serious. And indeed, they are very serious. Okay? The Board of Fiscal Control operated approximately a year before Maria came and said, no more. Many people in Puerto Rico, particularly those who favor statehood, thought that the Board of Fiscal Control was coming to help to revitalize the economy, to create jobs. And they were very shocked when they realized that the Board of Fiscal Control did not go there to help. They went there to get the money in whatever way possible, for which they began to do things that we are also familiar with in the U.S. mainland. People who retired, let's cut down your pension let's cut down money for health services. Let's take money from education, so on and so forth. It was really dramatic, aggressive, and violent. But it was legal because that's why they went there. That was 2016. It lasted until Maria struck the island. Another important thing that happened in 2017, November, like in the US, we had elections, governors, we elected governor, and we elected a governor who was promising statehood. It's right at the corner. Don't you see it? Go and see it, it's coming. And I'm living in the mainland and I say, oh my God, the last thing American middle class wants to hear right now is that you are going to make a bankrupt island 51st state. No, there's absolutely no way that's going to happen. Okay? And that's how he won. I'm going to talk a little bit about him later on. So those are the political, economic realities of Puerto Rico when Maria hit. One more thing happened. 1 week before Maria knocked on the door, we had Irma. Irma was another hurricane. It devastated the lesser Antilles, smaller islands like Dominica. Destroyed it. People in Puerto Rico were following it. The island is here. The hurricane is coming. People are getting scared. All of a sudden, it detours and it destroys Cuba, Florida. Puerto Rico is spared. For maybe almost 15, 20 years, people in Puerto Rico have been accustomed to the hurricane, nothing happens. Wow, celebration! When Irma took a detour and ended up somewhere else, people were saying, we are blessed. I understand the difficulty of the moment. In fact, when Maria hit Puerto Rico, my sister, who lives on an 18th floor in front of the ocean, and they have said, those of you who are living up high, please go away. Some of those buildings are not made to withstand winds of 155 miles an hour. And my sister was saying, oh, come on, no, please. My mother had to grab her and take her to my brother, where they all stayed together. So people did not believe it was going to happen because it hasn't happened in such a long time. Okay? So that's my account of what was happening before Maria. Let's see what happened after Maria. From Tuesday, September the 19th, and that was the last time I spoke with my mother until the 23rd of September. I knew she was with my brother, my sister. I trusted that nothing was going to happen to them, but I did not hear from her in 3 days. I was connected to YouTube, media, any information that was out, I was reading, but I was not able to talk with her. From one day to the next, everything changed for the worst. Okay? You go to bed at night, listening to the wind, the rain. You wake up and you do not recognize the neighborhood. What happened here? Where are the trees? where are the electrical alarms? From one day to the next, everything changed for the wars. What was Maria? Maria, I just met a girl named Maria, and suddenly that name would never be the same to me. Maria was one super blow of wind and rain that brought down 3 fundamental collapses: electricity, communications, roads. No electricity, which means no gasoline and no credit cards. You have to go back to a cash economy, making lines to get your money because there was no way of paying with your credit card. So electricity went down, fundamentally because it was an outdated system. It was a centralized system that started on the southern part of the island, and then it covered the entire island. If something happened here, everyone is going to be without electricity. Whereas they make now modules independent so that that doesn't happen. Well, Puerto Rico had an outdated electrical grid, and everything went down. Dramatic because electricity is the heart of everyday life. You don't know how much life is complicated if you don't have electricity. You have to really start from zero. Look at some of the complications. The federal government gave Puerto Rico some loans to rebuild the electrical grid. But it's a loan that does not allow Puerto Rico to modernize it. It's only to rebuild the old system. So all the time, all the effort, all the money from September the 20th up to today, it's been used to create an old-fashioned, useless, perverted system. Just because it is a condition for the federal loan. The Tesla Corporation offered Puerto Rico, hey, they've been doing that in many other small islands hit by hurricanes. The Tesla Corporation, which is the super electric company, said, we will rebuild, modern. Federal government said, no. Tesla Corporation was able to go to a children's hospital, build an electric plant, solar, so that they could help some of the kids. Okay? After you lose your electricity, life becomes very fragile. After I heard and seen what happened in Puerto Rico, I think now everything is so fragile. Everything can come down immediately. Communications also went down. Probably you saw on TV a group of Puerto Ricans gather outside, maybe next to a mountain, all using their cellular phone. Well, that was a place where they could get some connection, okay? In general, the communication collapsed. And after the 23rd, when I finally regained contact with my mother, it was easier for me to call her from here than it was for my sister who lives there to contact her. If you had a device that could connect directly with the satellite, like radio stations and some of the telephones, then you were able to communicate. But that's not, most of the people don't have that. They had to go and look for a location where there was still some signal to use the cellular phone. In fact, I always listen to some radio programs there, and it was so funny because people from the mainland were calling the radio station, inquiring about their family, so as to try to get some type of connection, right? So it's an upside down world, you know? Electricity, communications, roads collapse also. Some cases, the wind just destroyed the road. In some cases, it undermined the foundation and it exploded. In many occasions, it put bridges down. Also, it brought trees down and you could not drive through. So people had to walk to the gas station, walk to the bank, walk to the supermarket or the grocery store if they were open, and make long, unending lines to get $10 of gasoline, or maybe to get 10, 15 minutes to go to the grocery store and buy whatever you want, and then next group you have to get out. Maria hit all the island. It just brutalized the entire island. It entered from the southern east coast, and it kind of diagonally went through, and it left through the northern western tip. But everything was devastated. Some places more than others. Luckily, my family, my mother, my sister, and my brother, their houses were not at all damaged by the hurricane, but they had to endure the pains of living in a destroyed country. Okay. I'm sure that some of the scenes that you've watched on TV are fundamentally from one area in Puerto Rico, which is called the Cordillera Central. It's a range of mountains from east to west, west to east, with a lot of meanderings and a lot of vegetation. Those people were incommunicado. They lost connection with the rest of the population because no one could go through those roads. Okay? They have been the #1 victims. They have died alone. They have suffered thirst, hunger. It's been horrible, that mountainous range. And they are still suffering today. When, for instance, in areas like San Juan, it's relatively normalized. Okay? Those people are still suffering, are still dying. The first 2 months from September to November were the worst 2 months in contemporary Puerto Rican history. Nothing has happened that has pushed people to the limits. Okay? And we will never forget Maria. Okay? And after Maria's stroke, I think we can talk about the hurricane after Maria. Okay, Maria hit, destroyed, but there was a worse hurricane after Maria, okay, which was a nightmare people had to endure for 2 months. What do I mean? I mean a man-made disaster. Horrible bureaucratic hurdles, intense political tensions. So after Maria was 10 times worse than what she did. Okay, because it just became infernal when it could have been made easier. That's the point. Slow recovery, very, very, very slow. Today, more than 100 days after, 50 or 60% of the population have electricity, okay? And what's interesting is that even though San Juan, which is the capital, was privileged in getting their electricity restored, even within San Juan, you have upper-class neighborhoods where people did not have electricity for 2 months. So the relationship between electricity and class was maintained, but at the same time collapsed. Because I know many people who were never able to get electricity before the second month, okay? The governor of Puerto Rico said by this summer we should have electricity restored to the entire island, which many people do not believe it, but at least that's what he said. Okay? And right now, nature is coming back. My mother drove from San Juan to the western tip, 2 hours away, and she was so very happy because life is coming back. Things are cleaner, you don't see as much debris, and things do not look like they've been bombed by a nuclear war. So after December, things began to normalize in general terms, not everywhere, okay? So the hurricane, after Maria, bureaucratic chaos, Puerto Rico elected a governor with no political experience. Sounds familiar? He is the son of a former governor who governed Puerto Rico during the abundant 1990s. So people thought, if we elect the son, he's going to bring back the money that the U.S. enjoyed in the 1990s with the Clinton administration. And like I told you, he ran the election saying, I'm bringing statehood right away. Okay. He is a privileged person because his father was governor. His last name is very famous. He should have started the line at the end. And he decided, I'm going to start it at the beginning, and I'm going to win. And he did win. People voted for him, even though he had no experience. And Maria came knocking on his door. Come here, sir. You skipped the line. You were supposed to be last, and you wanted to be first. During the first week after September the 20th, I followed him on YouTube, and I could not believe what was happening. He had no idea of the magnitude of the disaster, okay? He was playing politics, pretty face, well dressed up in FEMA uniforms and colors, posting every single photo on his Facebook page. He did not know what had happened. Okay? So many people blame him for increasing the problems because he just did not have the experience to deal with such a magnitude of a disaster. Okay? So, bureaucratic chaos, political chaos. The US federal government refuses to take decisive action. Some people have said it's Katrina all over again. I'm sure that you've seen President Trump's visit. He went there in October. And I don't need to comment more on that. Trump, in addition to all the things that you know that he said, he underscored the fact that federal government was not giving grants to Puerto Rico. It was giving loans to Puerto Rico. Wait a second. I thought that I had said that before Maria came, Puerto Rico had a huge, unpayable debt. Now it's going to have more debt because Trump said no federal grants. Everything we give you, you give back. I am not sure if I'm understanding the numbers because if you are bankrupt, you cannot pay more debt. But debt is the key of this economy, okay? Many people were shocked at the way the federal government was saying, we're not going to help you. What? People were saying, why are they so slow? Why are they so inefficient? Why don't they do what is required to do? For instance, get a fleet of helicopters and save those people in the mountain range who are dying. Do it, because you cannot do it on land. You have to go on a helicopter and get them, rescue them. FEMA was putting obstacles everywhere. It was making things more difficult. On top of the fact that we have an unexperienced governor, FEMA came with a horrible policy to make things worse. So people were saying, what is happening? Puerto Rico cannot do anything without the federal government because it's a non-incorporated territory, and the federal government doesn't want to do anything for Puerto Rico. What should we do? Die? Immediately after Maria hit Cuba, said, we are going to send a crew of electricians and experts dealing with disasters. And they are quite good in doing that. Venezuela said, we're going to send Puerto Rico oil so that they can deal with the fact that there's no oil. U.S. federal government said, you give nothing to Puerto Rico. We give to Puerto Rico. The non-incorporated territory found itself in a state of utter disarray. What are we going to do?